Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unscripted One-on-One and very special guest today. I am absolutely honored to have her on, and especially, and I know she's probably really busy right now. So not sure when people will be seeing this or hearing this, but today my guest is Senator Stephanie Kunze from Ohio, and she's taken time out of her busy schedule to join us today. And we are at the time of this recording about a week away from the election, which has to be a crazy time. So Stephanie, why don't you introduce yourself, maybe tell us a little bit about your family, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks so much for having me today on Unscripted. It's really a pleasure to join you and see you. It is 1 week till Election Day, 2020. I've never experienced an election quite like this one. Had some tough ones before, but this is definitely quite the year. In many ways, crazy for lots of different reasons, and the election is no exception. But I have the pleasure and the honor of serving the 16th Senate District in the state of Ohio, which is basically the western third of Franklin County. So it includes Worthington, Dublin, and then it comes down and grabs Upper Arlington, Hilliard, and then Grove City, and then parts of Columbus and a lot of townships along the western portion of the county. And like I said, I'm serving in my first term. I'm running for my last term. We are term limited here in Ohio. We have term limits. So you can run for 2 consecutive terms for the state Senate. I have a wonderful husband, Matt, and we've been married for almost 26 years. I had to think about that for a minute. Don't tell him. And I have 2 daughters, Hannah and Abby, and they are both actually right now at Ohio State. So
Awesome. So there's so many questions I have for you. And so let's start at the very beginning, because our first time we met was when our kids were at, I believe, Norwich, right? And so can you take us back to maybe your early career, and then what made you want to get into the political world? Can we start there? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I was a secretary at Norwich Elementary and absolutely loved that job. Remember meeting your family and many others who now have kids in college. I've actually written some college letters for some of the kids from Norwich, which is really kind of a cool coming full circle. But the reason I ended up at Norwich is kind of a long story, but I'll try to make it quick. I grew up, my parents, when they first got married, they both came from pretty poor backgrounds, I would say they had rough lives. They ended up getting married. My dad had been in Vietnam. He had been drafted into Vietnam. His mom had passed away right before he went over, right after he graduated from high school and right before he went over to Vietnam. Wow. From cancer. And then his dad died while he was over there. So the Army actually let him come home and finish up his tour here in the States. And that's when he met my mom. My mom had a kind of an interesting scenario too. She had actually gotten married, and her husband died of a brain aneurysm. And so anyway, she was in mourning, he was in mourning, they met, they got married. My dad he worked during the day, obviously, and then at night he took classes because he really wanted to go to college. So my family, thankfully, he ended up getting a really good job and then moved to New York. My family's originally from that state up north. I don't normally say that, but we moved to New York. And so my dad took classes again at night, did very well in his job. He worked for Eaton Corporation. We moved to South Carolina when I was in 2nd grade. And then my dad graduated from the University of South Carolina and put out resumes. And so we ended up in Indiana, and that's basically where I grew up from about 4th grade on. But we moved to a small town, and then he got a job with another company. So he kind of kept going up the ladder, but hard when you're a kid and you have to move a lot. Yeah. But I did move right before my freshman year of high school. And so that being said, I started a new high school, the new student. It was interesting because there were 2 middle schools that fed into that high school. And so all of the kids from one middle school thought I went to the other and vice versa. So I didn't get the new girl status that sometimes you get. So it was a little bit harder, but made some wonderful friends and lived in Bloomington, Indiana, and said to my parents, I'm I'm going to IU. I'm not moving anymore. So that being said, I graduated from Indiana with an English major degree and had almost enough credits to be a political science minor, but did not actually get the minor. But there was kind of a link from growing up in Indiana. We used to go from middle school. Our field trips were always to the state legislature. So
Wow.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we did a lot of history tours for Indiana for their for social studies and that type of thing. And so my mom reminded me not too long ago, she said, "Do you remember you used to always go on those trips and you were fascinated by watching the legislature in Indiana make laws?" And so I really thought I'd probably end up being an attorney, a lawyer. And that's kind of why I majored in English and some other things. But anyway, I worked for Estee Lauder during college, and
Oh,
they
wow.
offered me a job after college. And so I took a job with them and ended up being an account coordinator and traveling the state of Indiana. I lived in Indianapolis and hired and trained people that work behind the counters and managed special events, which is kind of funny now because that's a lot of what I do with campaigning in a strange way. A lot of those skills that I just enjoyed doing as a young 22-year-old for work really translated into campaigning. But politics was never on my radar, really. I really liked working for Estee Lauder. But I met a boy, I met Matt Kunze, my sorority sister from college, went to Worthington High School, and she
Okay.
had a Labor Day cookout after college and invited her friends from Worthington, where Matt grew up. So I ended up meeting him and falling in love, and he was still finishing up at Ohio State. And so I ended up moving from Indiana, my final move, really, my final state move to this state. So I've been in Ohio for, I get 28 or so years now. And so when I moved, I switched my job and I thought maybe I will pursue a law degree. So I ended up working for a law firm for a little bit and decided, actually, I took the LSAT and was thinking about going to school, but I was pregnant with Hannah. So I changed my mind and changed course and decided to stay home with her. And so I ended up working part-time from home for the law firm while my kids were little. And then Abby's 19 months, my kids are 19 months apart. So I probably would have stayed at that job for a long time, but the law firm at the time, I worked in their title area for real estate, and they ended up getting rid of the title agency. And so that's when my girls were getting a little bit older. Hannah was kindergarten, and I decided I needed, as soon as Abby went into first grade, Matt was like, "Are you going to go to work? What do you want to do?" And
Yeah.
that's when I started at Norwich, because it was really a great fit for me as a mom. It was a great, just working for the schools and meeting all of the families. It really was a joy, and it felt like a service, more so like it was never a job to me.
Wow.
It was
Yeah.
always serving families and really getting to know kids and parents and teachers. So I really loved doing that. And I never thought about running for office until I had a friend at the time run for Hilliard City Council. And she asked me to help her with all the grassroots stuff that goes into a campaign. So I dropped and knocked doors for her and took money at her fundraisers. And she ended up winning a seat on city council. And as you know, Hilliard is a growing community. And so having someone that I knew well, that kind of knew what was happening at the time, they were redoing the West Pool and some
Yeah.
of the Hilliard mainstays. And so it was great. And she decided not to run for a second term. And that's kind of how a lot of women need to be asked to run for office. And she did ask me, she said, "I think you'd make a great city council person. You should think about running." So that's kind of a really long story of how I got to a place to think about running for public office.
Wow. I was thinking about that. Like, so were you like the high school class president or a vice president or treasurer or anything like that? Or this literally kind of came out of nowhere?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't. I was on like this. I was active in student life and,
Yeah.
played sports and did that kind of thing. But I really, it wasn't something that was on my radar that I've been plotting out for a long time. I will say, as a little girl, I thought about this the other day. I grew up in the 70s, to date myself. And I remember planning our first grade program was all about America. We learned like every patriotic song and we sang it. We all wore flag shirts.
Yeah.
And I took that very seriously. I took my flag shirt that summer and I organized a parade on my street. I was like 7. And we had an American, kind of almost like a mini 4th of July parade. So I think I've always had an interest in, being in some sort of service. And I've always been very patriotic in that regard, but I never thought I would run for office.
Wow. So I can't imagine that shift from really that's quite a pivot from secretary at an elementary school to, the political life. And I have a feeling, and maybe I'm wrong, and you can certainly correct me. I have a feeling it was nothing at the time that you ran. You had no idea where we would be today, because I think we would all agree this is wild where we're in right now. So if you would have known that, would you still have run, or was it just did it present itself as you went along?
It presented itself as I went along. I would say that going from school secretary to city councilwoman really, in some ways, seems like a big leap, but really the service to families in our community and just kind of the love and care of taking care of people was really the kind of underlying thread between the two. Like I said, I didn't ever think of Norwich as a job, and I really didn't think of city council as a job. Like I feel like serving our community was really a joy. And to your point about not thinking or not looking ahead or not knowing where we would be, I didn't even think I would ever leave city council, frankly. Like I had to have a couple of different friends asked me within a really short period, hey, are you ever going to run for a higher office? And I looked at them like they were crazy because I really loved serving on city council. And so looking at, I think, that's kind of one of the good things about life. And, I'm a woman of faith, and I believe, God kind of shows you a path. He gives, little glimpses. And if he showed you the big picture ahead of time, I think we'd probably all be intimidated and maybe not want to take that next small step. But really those small steps add up, I think, eventually, and really put you in the place where you're supposed to serve.
You're right. And I was, as you were talking, I was thinking it's almost like that being in a pot of water, that at the beginning it's lukewarm and somebody keeps turning up the heat, and before you know it, you're in boiling water, but it's been the same because you've been in that water, kind of a thing. So what I just have so many questions. I'm trying to sort through them one at a time. So and I'll say this, and I forgot to mention this. I have, to our audience, whoever's listening or watching, before we got on, I had given the okay, I guess you would say, because there's never, I never know what questions may be in or out of bounds, and that's the beauty of Unscripted. So if there's anything that I ask Stephanie that then she can't answer or is not, okay, she's just going to say pass, and we're going to be okay with that. So just to put that out there. So let's transition. And I will say this too, I work for a small business in Hilliard, and the pandemic hits. And I think, for any business, small business, large business, nobody really knew where are we at with this thing, because this was new to all of us. And I made a phone call to you, and you were kind enough to help walk me through some things. So what has it been like leading in your position during a pandemic?
Well, it's been interesting. It's been unlike any other time of being in service and leadership. But really, I feel like, to your point about, you made a call, so many businesses made a call to me. I was also privileged to be on a Zoom every Saturday morning with several small business owners and larger corporations. I met with, all of our Central Ohio business partners, the Columbus Partnership, the chambers, all kind of really pulled together to make sure that their members and that other businesses' voices were being heard, especially early on with what they needed as far as maintaining their ability to remain open, or at least not to be closed forever, to have some stability to pay employees and kind of go through until we got to a little bit more information on what reopening could look like and how that could happen. And so I think that one of the really I've been trying to look for the silver lining whenever it comes to COVID. And so one of the small blessings of that was that at this point in my service, I've had enough time to build relationships, both with our community and also with the people that I need to connect to our community too. So the state really is kind of the middleman when it came to the pandemic. We
Right.
were, the federal government was they provided the PPP and the CARES dollars and all of those things, and then some of that went directly to individuals or to larger cities and that type of thing. But the state really managed quite a bit of the actual money coming from the feds, and then obviously our local partners, our local school boards and our local municipalities, and then obviously our businesses, small businesses, were really, on the receiving end of that. And so being kind of in the middle at this point in stage in my service was really a blessing, because I was able to, I know enough of how the system works. I have enough relationships throughout the state and with our federal partners and with our local partners to really be able to connect people quickly. It was the same with constituents who needed help with ODJFS and with a job loss, that type of thing. It was kind of a blessing for me to be in this spot during this time. And I felt very grateful many times that it was me, and that I had enough years of experience, because really with term limits, I understand them. I'm thankful for them. In some ways, I wouldn't be sitting here probably if it weren't for somewhat for term limits and an open state rep seat. But there is a level of knowledge and experience that you can only get by doing this job over time. And I think I'm kind of in that sweet spot where I've done it long enough, and I know enough people both in the Senate, the House, and then you got to remember the governor and the administration is obviously a huge part of it. And
Right.
so building those relationships was key.
Yeah. Have you, do you go on social media?
Well, I have to
Mhm.
kind of because of my, I have a lot of accounts. I will say I have a lot of accounts on social media, especially on Facebook. I try not, I don't read the comments. So people probably, especially on the negative ones. And we're running a social media campaign that I am obviously, I have some control over it. I don't mean to say I don't have control over it, but
Sure.
there are like lots of different ads that are out there as well. And so there's just if I spent all day, it would take me all day just to try to even keep up with a couple of the accounts.
Right.
I do my own Twitter. I have my own Instagram, and then I have a state Senate Instagram also. And then my staff really helps a lot with my official state Senate page, because there's a lot of information that we try to get out to constituents on the work that we're doing on the official side, especially.
Yeah. So any business I've ever worked for, you always have, a friend that came on not long ago said, when we were growing up, and we were talking about race in America, but he was talking about how there's two sides, and then there's kind of that middle, and that middle circle, depending on what the topic is, can be very large or very small. I find that in our business as well. There's, in really any business that I've ever worked for, there's people that really hate you, there's people that love you, and then there's this middle. And I think the goal may be to expand that middle as far as possible and have the small sides be as small as possible. Have you found that, is that pretty true in your role as well? That especially in the time that we're in right now, I got to think there's two extremes and then there's a middle. Do you feel like that middle is big or small, or like, is that kind of where you're at with this whole thing?
That's kind of funny you say that, because actually this is a lesson learned from Norwich Elementary. So to circle back to Norwich, our principal used to tell new kindergarten teachers, look, you're gonna have 25% of the parents that are gonna love you no matter what you do. You have 25% of the parents that are never gonna think that you're doing enough for their child, as a kindergartner. And then the parents in the middle, you'll have about, 50 in the middle that think you're doing well. And,
Right.
that's kind of how if you're being a good teacher. And I think the same, like you said, is true in business. It's obviously true in politics as well. I think that, I'm a person, I was voted most bipartisan in the legislature, along with my colleague, Sean O'Brien, who's a Democrat up in the eastern portion of the state. And that's not just out of the Senate, it was out of all of the 99 House members and the 33 senators. And so I think that, that speaks a lot for the district that I represent. And also kind of the person that I am. I look for win-win when possible. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't try to assume that I know or have all the right answers. I do a lot of listening. And so I think that, to your point about the extremes, it's very hard to, I think a lot of times on the extremes, people have, they have a Tetris effect. They have their glasses on, and they're only looking for what they want to see.
Right.
And so really, I think the middle is kind of the place where you really get things done,
Yeah.
and accomplished, and really move things forward. And I think even within the pandemic, I think that, being able to open safely and keep in mind that there are, I serve constituents who have very, very severe health risks
Right.
and
Right.
needs, and are very fragile. And I think, serving them, to the best of my ability, and with kindness and humility, by doing all of the things that I can do to, keep myself from catching it and taking it anywhere, and keeping them safe, while still understanding that, people, their lives, people are without hope right now. A
Right.
lot of people are really hurting. A lot of our young people are hurting.
Right.
They want school to be open. They want, people want to feel a sense of normalcy. And so really kind of balancing, both of those things has been, what I've hopefully been doing. That's what I've been trying to do, and hope to continue to do as we move forward. And we know so much more. I
Mhm.
think each month, we have a little bit more information, more tools. And so I think that's been helpful as far as trying to reopen as much as we can safely.
And and I don't even know if I'll probably put a footnote in the post. There's nothing happening here you didn't ask me to do this. I ask you to do this. There's no support from your campaign for me to do this. So anything I say, please people understand the fact that, and anybody watching this, listening to this, please understand the fact that this is my show. and I'm going to say what I believe. And that is, when I see the commercials for you, and they say that you're the most bipartisan person, I've never spent a day in those rooms with you, but I know that about you. And I would say that, there's people, there's shows, or I should say there's commercials, even town halls, even debates, that you roll your eyes and you're like, that's a lie. And I don't see that in your commercials. I think your commercials are true, because what I do know of you, I do know that is true. And I believe you are fair, and I do believe your heart, and I believe you are a person of faith. And all those things are really, really important when you go to check the ballot box. And so I don't want to get into too much politics on this, but I do want people to hear the fact that I asked you to come on. You didn't ask me. This isn't some kind of a commercial for you. This is me supporting you, because I do believe in you and everything that you're doing. And I do believe in what they say in the commercials is true, and everything that you said is true. It would shock me if you were any other way than very bipartisan and work with people, because that's just who you are. So, okay, off the political rant on my side. So how do you decompress from the negativity around you currently? Because we're very, very divided as a country, and even as a state. Everybody's got their opinions. So how do you decompress from that as a member of politics and being in politics?
It's been interesting. I think people would be surprised to know that in the state Senate, I haven't checked the last couple of years. We've been, I think our bills pass about 93 to 94% bipartisan. And many times they've passed actually like 33 to nothing. So it's not just one person coming over and making it a bipartisan effort. It's really, your state Senate. The beauty of our founding fathers was that when they set up the system of government, and thankfully Ohio, mirrored it, the Senate really is the more deliberative body. It takes longer for things to go through your state Senate than it does the House. The House is, closer to the people. It's every 2-year term, and in the state Senate we serve a 4-year term. So we do have a little bit more of an opportunity to press pause, and I represent about 380,000 people, and so having that perspective is different even than when I was a city councilwoman representing about 30,000. And so I think that having a different kind of viewpoint of what my job is, what my role is, how I want to serve and do what's best for all of the people that live in my district, whether they voted for me or not, whether they're in the township or in the heart of, the most suburban part of Columbus, kind of Clintonville area that's more urban, all across the district. And so I think that kind of perspective also allows me to decompress a little bit, because I don't follow, I mean, I follow what happens on the national level. I mean, obviously we all have to know what's going on.
Right.
But I don't spend a lot of time. I don't watch a lot of news. I read a lot of it instead of watching it. I feel like what you take in, to your point about social media as well, I try not to take in too much of the negativity coming from the national side as well. And then, I spend a lot of time trying to, again, listen to people, hear them from where they're coming from and where they are. And I will tell you that during the pandemic, it's shown a light on all of the places in society that were either underfunded or just not stable from a structural foundation standpoint. It's just
Right.
highlighted a lot of the hurts and fractures in our society.
Right.
And so I've found that a lot of people just feel like they need to be heard.
Hmm.
And so a lot of my job has been listening and really saying, like, I see you and I hear you and I understand where you're coming from. And we're working to try to lift others and really try to meet those needs, whether it be from, needing early childhood care for
Right.
child while you're trying to work from home, or, someone on an IEP who is having difficulty on the Zoom platform with schools, all of those different kinds of concerns. And so I try to stay away from a lot of the negativity and try to just focus on the people that I am blessed to serve and I'm here to care for, and really working through to find good common sense solutions, and making their voices heard, whether it be to the governor on some issues, whether they disagree or agree with his some of his philosophy on the pandemic, or whether it's, with our federal partners and that type of thing. But it is a challenge. I think people, you know, are pulled in different directions based on where they find themselves, but everyone is hurting. So that's kind of like the underlying, no one, my daughter said it the other day, she's like, Mom, no one in the entire world has escaped feeling something from 2020 in this pandemic.
Right. And she's wise beyond her years in that. I think that's what challenges us all. It's the weight. It's almost an invisible weight of that we're all carrying that we don't even realize. We just keep putting these little rocks in our backpack every day, whether it's a story we hear about or something that we thought we were going to be able to do and we're not. And then, or even a mask and all these things. We keep putting these rocks in our backpack. And I feel like most of us at this point in this thing are like, this backpack's really heavy. And then we have a friend that comes along and says, my backpack's really heavy. Can you hold it? And it's like, yeah, but I'm carrying one too. I think that's kind of where we're at, is we're all just carrying really heavy rocks at this point. But I can't imagine what it's like to be in a position that you're in when you're getting it from both sides, because you have your own family to worry about and you're navigating this too. And you have 2 daughters in school and online and virtual, all these things. You're navigating that. And oh, by the way, here's this other thing that you're right in the midst of that hurricane, I guess you would say. That has to be a lot. That has to be a lot to carry and to do and to navigate, especially when you didn't. It sounds like from our beginning of our conversation, you didn't set out for this. Like you weren't when you didn't wake up one day when you were born and said, I'm going to do this. This is just, it's presented itself, and you have done very well in that. So I know, not to transition, but I know there's another platform that you're very, very passionate about and maybe others as well. Can you talk about that? I know trafficking is a big one. Can you talk about that and really any other platforms that you have that are just so near and dear to your heart and that you really spend other time that you can, not devoted to COVID, but really what you've set out to, that's your passion. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I started out, I think, from the very beginning, families and children have always been where my heart is. And so a lot of the work that I do kind of stems from that, and then goes into protecting Ohioans most vulnerable. And that obviously leads to trafficking and not only children, but it's not just women, but oftentimes it's women. I have had the opportunity to work with, he's retiring, but Judge Paul Herbert founded Catch Court here in Franklin County, which really revolutionized the way women were coming into the court system for prostitution. And he felt like something was not the same. It wasn't like the quote unquote olden days of prostitution. There was something else there. And so he started digging deeper, realized that there was actually, more of a criminal enterprise going on, where a trafficker would get someone addicted to drugs and then traffic them, and really just keep them on a cycle of abuse for for a long time, because of that very close parallel with opioids, especially as we've seen. So when I first when I ran for state representative, most of my work was focused on the opioid epidemic back in 13 and 14, even 2015. But during that same time, we were starting to see, especially a dear colleague of mine in Toledo, Teresa Fetter, was really noticing up in her part of the district in the state, where you can get to so many different places quickly from Toledo with logistics. She started bringing that to Governor Kasich's attention, and so those two things kind of came at the same time. And Judge Paul Herbert noticed it. In Franklin County, we're obviously a huge logistics place for the United States. We can move goods and services quickly, but also, unfortunately, we can move illegal things, drugs, and people quickly. So all of these things kind of work together at the same time, and to kind of bring awareness to what was happening. And so I was able to work with Senator Fetter. She's now Senator Fetter, but she was represented back with me. But we started doing bipartisan work again on some of the issues. And one of the biggest things that we found from Cuyahoga County's task force, and then we were hearing it from Judge Herbert here in Franklin County too, was that the women that were coming through Catch Court, the program he devised and kind of created it's a 2-year program. It includes many community partners that involve getting it off of drugs, and then having lots of support, both social services, counseling, all of the things you can think of. I will say trafficking is one of the darkest evils imaginable for so many reasons, but it really tears at the very soul, I think, of people. It really makes them feel worthless. And then you add the drug component on top of it, and it feels like it's almost impossible to break that cycle.
Right.
It feels, to your point about the backpack and the rocks, when I've worked on the issues with trafficking, it feels like it's chains, right? Like they're really in chains. And so to be able to go through the process, once you've decided that you don't want that life and that you're going to break free from your trafficker, and you go through all of the work that the women do in in a Catch Court process, they come out on the other side, and it is truly like their symbol is a butterfly, because it is truly like they've transformed into a whole new creature, a whole new person. And then what we were finding is they would go to interview for a job or try to apply for housing, and that they wouldn't be able to access it unless they either lied on the application. Many of them had petty crimes and other misdemeanors as a result of being trafficked. It would be a choice. Do you want to be trafficked today, or will you deliver these drugs? Or do you want to steal this, or do you want to do that? So many of them chose the other. And so we, like I said, worked with Cuyahoga County and some other task force across the state to really say there's got to be a way for them to go before a judge and ask for these to be expunged. And so that's what Senate Bill 4 did. And that's one of, not to go back to the commercial, but that's really a real person who I got to meet a few years ago. And I didn't ask her to do the commercial. She wanted to do it because of how much it changed her life to have the ability to get that expungement off of her record. And so things, I think, we've also worked to increase penalties for promoting prostitution when they're in connection with a drug charge as well, because we know that that's very linked. So I think that there are some things that the state has done, even just in the last 4 years, that are making a difference. There's obviously more to do, and I hope to continue to work on those issues in the next General Assembly. But it's been probably one of the most rewarding things that I've ever had a chance to work on. I've worked on some really important legislation, but really helping restore and give hope to people and not have them be re-victimized every time they want to go back in. We know a lot about, how our minds work, and, just to get to the mindset that they deserve a better life, they deserve a job, they deserve love and all of those things. And then to continue to be beaten down, and not have access to housing, once you've really made such an investment to change your life, it's demoralizing. So being able to lift others has been, it's been really rewarding. It's been great to see how much the best part about it too is that then they have all gone on to lift others. And so it's almost, it's like you plant a few seeds and then they grow, and then they just keep growing and going and growing. And so to see the investment that they're making in others, and other women especially, and especially young women, it's really, really awesome.
Yeah. I hope anyone that's listening to this will, and I'm not trying to promote my own whatever. I hope they'll go watch the video and go to right where you were just saying that, because you lit up when you talked about the outcome. And that is one. And two, I think, and I mean no disrespect to the craft that you're in, but I think there's people that are politicians, and then there's people that are real. And I think people will see, and I probably hear in this, that you're real. You're not giving me political answers. You're talking from the heart. And these are things that, as you were talking, I was thinking that's your why, it seems like, but you have more than one. There's a lot of whys. I think when you go into this career, it's helping people through the pandemic. It's helping trafficking. It's helping somebody from Hilliard that calls you and says, hey, I know you, can you help me with, I think there's a lot of whys in what you're doing. And anytime we can see that win, the pandemic has provided something different, and that we're all looking for the win still. But it sounds like that, and seeing, literally, you literally lit up when you said that. So that's a huge platform for you and a why. And I hope anybody that sees or listens to this knows that you're not giving me political answers. You're not your typical politician. You are literally truly invested in this as a life, and it's what you want to do. And I think we all believe, and I don't want to step too far out, but I think we all want to believe that that's how most people start in politics, is that. And I think at some point, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I feel like there's some people we see maybe on more national stage that at some point that shifts, and they unfortunately get caught up in the politics of the politics, when there's people that still want to do really, really good work like you're doing for us in Ohio, and even in Hilliard. So anyway, again, another political rant. I hope that was okay. But all right, a few minutes, and I've taken a lot of your time, and I appreciate it, because I know you've got to be busy this time of year, running 1,000,000 miles getting up to next week. So what is the day in the life of a typical senator? What does it look like?
Every day is different. It depends on, and we have kind of, since we work in 2-year cycles, our general assemblies are 2-year terms. So a campaign looks much different than the first year of the 2-year cycle, and then the second year looks different depending on where you are. But really, most days, I think, depending on, do you want to hear campaign or official? They're both, they all kind of run together sometimes too. I would say that much of my day is spent, I'm really grateful. I have wonderful staff. Like, I should just say that out ahead of time. My staff is the best. They work very hard. They've worked all the way through the pandemic, obviously. So they've been, they need a vacation, I'm sure.
Soon, very soon.
They're they take all the constituent calls, all the constituent emails. We read them all. We listen to them all. We respond to as many as that we can. So there are a few times like people will email something that we can't. It's a pass, to your point. Like, we just can't respond to it or something. But so that we spend a lot of time doing that. I spend in normal times before COVID, I would spend a lot of time. I divide my time between being downtown at my office, meeting with constituents or advocacy groups. We have lots of different groups throughout the state. I think people, think lobbyist is a bad word, but really, the ALS license plate that we just enacted last week. That was actually a group of the chapters, the ALS chapters here, lobbying on behalf of members that have ALS. And so really we meet with, I chair the Cancer Caucus, so I spend a lot of time meeting with groups from that have all sorts of interest in research or new therapies, drugs, better healthcare plans being available for constituents, all of the things you could think of when it comes to that healthcare. So you spend a lot of time doing really listening again to what ideas people have, constituent ideas that come from local governments, from our schools, from our school districts. We get a lot of ideas, that kind of thing. And then we also spend a lot of time in the district, usually Mondays and Fridays during a normal, not a campaign cycle. I would spend, at a local chamber luncheon and those types of events. And so really, if you think about the way the state is, there are, like I said, 33 senators, and some of them live very far away. So the way that the General Assembly was set up originally is that most of our official business occurs on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, sometimes a Thursday, but not as much on Monday and Friday, just so that people can travel back to, Gallipolis or up north, wherever, 2 to 3 hour trip, and be at home for, a couple of days and be in touch with their constituents that they're serving and their family, and then come back down. So it's kind of like like I said, no day is ever like now. During the final moments of campaigning, I actually was out in Grove City this morning, out campaigning, and then had to rush back and try to make myself not look so like I'd been out walking in the humid, whatever this mist is, this lovely Ohio weather we're having. But yeah, and then I have, I've been doing a lot of Zooming and that type of thing. But really, it's meeting with people, it's listening. When I ran for state representative, my mom asked me, what does your calendar look like? And I actually just took a screenshot of it and sent it to her, because I was just meeting with different people in different groups every 15 minutes. Wow. For all day when I was downtown. Yeah. I decided that I read a book by Gary Keller. He's the Keller Williams guy, and it was called The One Thing. And he kind of basically said that the premise is you can only do one thing well, right? Like, you can try to multitask and try to do all of these things, but really, if you want to be successful, you need to really focus and hone your skill on one thing. And so as a beginning member of the General Assembly, it was almost overwhelming. I joke that it's called the General Assembly because you have to generally know a little bit about everything. And so a lot of my colleagues will pick a subject matter. They'll be an expert in education, or they'll be an expert in something judiciary related if they're an attorney or whatever. And I felt like I would be best serving my constituents if I picked my one thing as build relationships. And so I spent my first term in the Ohio House of Representatives, and then the second term really strengthening relationships with my colleagues, with the Senate, with the administration, and then just with all of the people in the local level that I worked with, and that type of thing. And it really served me well, and it has served me. I've never strayed from it. It's still my mantra, because it's like that old saying, you can pick up the phone and call the person that has all of the institutional knowledge or knows all about X. You just need to know that person. Right. So I don't need to know all about X. I couldn't possibly know about every single business or, subject that comes across my desk as a state senator. But I do need to know who is the person that you can trust and who does have that knowledge. And so I spend a lot of time building relationships too.
And that's amazing. Like, all the things that you just mentioned are overwhelming to me. But it all makes very good sense. And I think you're right. Being good at that one thing, that's great advice. So what are links? Anything that you want to get out to the one or two people that may see this? Is there anything that you want to get out?
I hope your whole family's going to watch. That's more than one or two.
There'll be 4 at least, right? There's 5 of us because I'll watch it a few times. So no, I do want to get this out to anybody that may see it. What's the best way leading up to next week? How can they find out more about you, your platform? Do you have a website? Do you have a phone number if they want to call you? What are all the links?
Yeah, so if you're interested in the campaign, it's stephaniekunze.com. If you are watching and you live in my district and you need help with something as your state senator, then you can go to kunze@ohiosenate.gov, and you'll be able to find my official website. And so just so people know, my staff that works downtown that's paid by taxpayers, they don't work on campaign issues. But they do all of the other kind of helps that you would need in my official role. So those are the two best ways to get a hold of me.
And I'll put those in the blog post. So if somebody's watching this on YouTube, if that is how they got here, go to my site, aaronconrad.com. You'll see it. Click on this post, and you'll see those links in there as well. Same if you're driving and you don't want to pull over and write that down, just go to those sites and you'll find those too. So any last words? I'm so thankful. Let me say this before that. I'm so thankful you were on, and I'm honored to call you a friend, to have that you would come on and spend this little bit of time with this little bitty podcast, because I think so many of us go and, there's the two big guys at the top. When we go into the little curtain and we place our votes, there's the two big guys. That's what we go in for. But there's so many names under there that work really hard, like yourself, that have a passion for something. And some people, they just go all red. Some people go all blue. So I'm thankful, and I hope anybody sees this that doesn't know you, now they know you a little bit, and they know your heart. And when they go into that little booth, they're picking. Again, you can pick whichever way you want, but at least they've had a chance to hear who you are, how you represent this state, and just what you're about. So I hope that's what we get out of this. Is there anything that you want to share before we log off?
I think I will say thanks for saying that in general, because I do think people need to remember that, whether you want to go in and vote just for the top of the ticket, or you don't want to vote for the top of the ticket, there are so many local candidates and issues that are important. And so, I think, not to sound, but, my dad was in Vietnam. My grandpa had a Purple Heart in World War II. I created the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission to focus on, this was the 100th anniversary of women, the 19th Amendment, women achieving the right to vote. And so I have two daughters, as I mentioned. I think that it's very important to remember that, we have a democracy if we can keep it.
Right.
As Benjamin Franklin, I think, said that. And so I think, voting is such an important right that we shouldn't take it for granted. And we really should be informed and try to vote, or, up and down the ticket, because
Right.
a lot of the things that actually affect you in your life are your local, either your local
Right.
city council, your local school board, or your state legislature
Right.
as well. So it's a great point.
No, that's a great point, is that I think a lot of times we focus on the two big guys, when in reality is we're missing what's happening right here in our backyard. So thank you so much. Thank you for caring for my kids at Norwich when they were sick or little or whatever, when they were there. Thank you for taking time out of your, I'm sure, very, very busy schedule to come on today. And, again, I don't want to be political, but I wish you the best of luck next week. I really do.
I wish you the best with your I'm a big fan of podcasts. So you might have a little podcast right now, but I have a feeling it might get bigger faster than you think. So I wish you all of the best with it too.
Well, thank you for putting wind in the sails, especially right now in the culture that we're in. So thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck, and we'll probably have you on again. Let's do this again, maybe after, and let's see, let's get through next week and maybe the days that follow, and we'll have you on again anytime. You're always welcome. It's an open invitation.
Thanks, Aaron. Take
All
good
right.
care.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll do. Bye-bye.